2017 is the year of activation of lending in Ukraine. Reforms of the banking sector are aimed exactly at that. Among other things, it is planned that banks will actively credit both the large corporate sector and small and medium businesses. For me, the reforms that currently being implemented by the National Bank of Ukraine are quite successful, and the banking sector is ahead of others when it comes to reform. The only question is what is there to do with other sectors? The stable development of the banking system depends on many factors, primarily on the implementation of judicial reform, as well as on manipulation and the dishonesty of borrowers, particularly loan default schemes. That is, when a borrower applies to the court to not pay back the money borrowed. In this way, the implementation of structural reforms, adoption of necessary laws, and fighting corruption will help the banking system to become more efficient and transparent. Through stress testing and decapitalization, the banking system has become more stable than before, I believe. The process of recovery of the banking system has taken place, and there are no more large bankruptcies, as there were previously. I can say that there is a high probability that if you make a deposit in a Ukrainian bank in the top 20, there is an almost 100% guarantee that there will be no problems, and you will be able to withdraw your money whenever you need it. Another issue is the failed banks. The investors of such banks could wait for their money for months or even years. That is particularly relevant to commercial banks. Deposits in state-owned banks are more protected at the legislative level, according to the officials. Today, 4 state banks are operating in Ukraine: Ощадбанк, Укргазбанк, Укрексімбанк, and the recently nationalized Приватбанк.
Це найбільший, це системно важливий банк,
Privatbank is the largest systematically important bank in Ukraine, which unfortunately was not in its best shape. The National Bank of Ukraine realized that Privatbank had a risky credit policy and primarily credited its shareholders. So we had been insisting for quite some time that they resolve those problems. After it became known that the shareholders had no intentions of solving those problems, we initiated the transition of the bank into state ownership.
Стало зрозуміло, що акціонери ці проблеми не налаштовані вирішувати. Ми ініціювали процес переходу банку у державну власність.
According to Vavrishchuk, that way the state had solved one of the most difficult problems of the Ukrainian banking sector.
Звичайно, залишається дуже багато питань щодо майбутнього Приватбанку, якою буде його бізнес-стратегія.
Of course, there is still many questions regarding the future of Privatbank, like what will be its business strategy, who it is going to work with, and who it is going to credit. But these issues are already being worked on. The bank has already been recapitalized by government bonds, and it can fully meet its obligations to depositors.
Внутрішньої державної позики. Банк ліквідний, він може в повному обсязі виконувати свої зобов'язання перед вкладниками.
I think that the cleansing of the bank system, which is being conducted by the National Bank of Ukraine, has 2 components. The first one is actually beginning such work. There was a small number of banks that were being used for money laundering purposes. I believe that those financial institutions definitely had to be removed from the banking sector.
Але проводили операції, пов'язані з різними відмиванням коштів і так далі. То я вважаю, що цю роботу треба було почати, і ці фінансові установи треба було прибрати з ринку.
Starting with 2014, more than 80 banks were declared insolvent. That is almost 50% of the total number of banks that operated in Ukraine. Even though that process was quite painful for both bank customers and the economy as a whole, cleaning up the banking sector and removing insolvent banks from the market will make the banking system of our country much stronger.
Ми не можемо на 100% виключати, що там протягом якогось періоду всі банки будуть залишатися.
Today, all the problems of large banks have been resolved. We cannot say that all banks will remain liquid and solvent for a certain period. We are now starting to diagnose the 35 small banks that we had not been able to analyze in detail over the past 2 years. If there are certain reservations regarding the operation of those banks, their management and owners should respond to those reservations in an appropriate way.
So since 2014, the central bank has been very active in making sure that that there is a good basis in Ukraine for financial stability. Banks and a number of bank owners were basically using the deposits of the population for their own use.
The payment of compensations to depositors is an additional fiscal burden. So, in order to avoid such risks, the regulator aims to ensure the conditions of the banking sector, which minimizes the bankruptcies of large banks.
Регулювання має бути
Regulation must be substantially revised, and we are already working on this. Regulation should be enhanced, and it should be more stringent. Any problems of commercial banks should be identified at an early stage, while they can still be solved. Our goal is to prevent situations where some problems are not identified on time, which can lead to the bank being declared insolvent after its problems increase in scale.
Проблеми не ідентифікуються вчасно, потім вони збільшуються в масштабі, і в кінцевому результаті ми змушені оголошувати банки неплатоспроможними.
The National Bank of Ukraine is currently undertaking the reform of banking supervision functions. This reform involves a complete change of approaches to the monitoring of commercial banks. The regulatory framework is being reviewed and new requirements are being introduced so that the financial institutions would evaluate the credit risks of their customers more conservatively and provide more leeway in terms of liquidity and, most importantly, so they will fulfill their obligations to depositors in a timely manner.